Let's do the news. A Democrat that voted for Elizabeth Warren that says he doesn't necessarily have a huge penchant for one Joe Biden, Ed Kilgore, I believe his name is, wrote an article that basically is starting the Joe Biden apology tour early. It's as if the writing's on the wall. Here's the catch. You don't write this article. It's in right here, the Intelligencer, right here. Just see it for yourself, not making it up. Give Biden a break. Give Biden a break. Elliot Kilgore. Kilgore. Is that Gore? Yeah, Kilgore says. Ed Kilgore. Give Biden a break. Give Biden a break. You lefties are being too hard on him. You lefties are being unfair and formulaic in your attacks on one Joe Biden. Give Joe Biden a break. Then when I first read this, it annoyed me. As I thought about it that much more and was about to go on, it just outright pissed me off. This is an outrageous article to write. Give Joe Biden a break. This is not normal. We're not in normality. 33 million people have been infected with a virus that was entirely due to the malfeasance of the government itself. Give Biden a break. Biden has assumed that mantle of government. Biden ran in that race. Biden decided to run in that race. Biden is the one who got in office. Biden is the one who told the public, I'm going to do $15 an hour minimum wage. I'm going to do marijuana. I'm going to do the PRO Act. I'm going to put through a public option. Even though I don't agree about getting rid of student debt, I am going to get rid of $10,000. Joe Biden had all of these items on his agenda. Give Joe Biden a break. I didn't want Biden to run. I didn't think Biden had the physical presence or the capability to run. I thought his cognitive capability had degraded significantly. And if you don't believe me, go look at the last debate Joe Biden was in and look at the most recent viewing of Joe Biden. He's a different man. He's a shadow of his former self. So no, I didn't necessarily want Joe Biden to run in that race. But Joe Biden ran. Joe Biden won. Joe Biden is president of the United States. Joe Biden has an agenda that he said that he wanted to accomplish and he wanted to pass. And you're going to tell me to give Joe Biden a break? If Joe Biden was successful, this article doesn't get written. Period. Now, you can say I am being hard on Joe Biden. I'm not being hard on Joe Biden at all. 600,000 Americans have died. 33 million have been infected. All of those people that have infected are going to have medical bills associated with it. Many of those people have downstream symptoms, meaning months later, they still have cognitive impairment or other kind of medical issues associated with their bout with COVID-19. My point is that the reason that you've had that many people infected, the reason that you've had 600,000 people die was entirely and directly related to the government of the United States. You're not in normality. And Joe Biden is just slow walking the country back to normality. For all of this talk of FDR, there has been no urgency. There has been no energy, no strength. You realize, as grim as it sounds when I say this, 600,000 dead Americans and having 33 million people infected with a pandemic is a moment of power. It is a moment of decision. Every bit as significant as 9/11. And the person who's president at the time has a choice to make. Given vision, given want, given leadership, he has the capability of harnessing the 600,000 Americans have died into political wins, into political gains, into a direction that the opposition party either loses outright or at the very least succumbs where they need to fall in line on some level and acquiesce to a new paradigm. But that's not what's happening. That's being wasted. You can make the argument, as is made here, that, look, Joe Biden got many of his political appointments passed already. Joe Biden got through the 1.9 trillion stimulus. That's true. But what else? Meaning, Joe Biden did go through rolling back Donald Trump's plans. That's true. And it is also true, you're right, that Biden only has 51 votes with the Kamala Harris tiebreak. That is true. It is also true that there are opposition figures in his own party in the Senate. Nobody has ever taken those things off the table. Those things are entirely accepted. The issue here is that Joe Biden has not shown any level of skill, capability to extemporaneously speak and go after his political opponents, whether they're in party or outside of his party. And if it dug into him, if it burned in him, in the way that you would think it would burn into somebody when 600,000 Americans have dropped dead and went up in flames. If it burned in him, it's a different presidency. The criticism that Joe Biden is getting from progressives, and honestly, I don't even know who you're talking about, because the lefties in Congress, just us Democrats, in addition to the regular Democrats, have basically entirely acquiesced. There hasn't been this huge amount of criticism coming from Democrats from the standpoint of the left. Now, if you're talking about progressives that are farther than a Democratic Party, yes, but that criticism is apt. Biden is like a puff of smoke. $15 an hour minimum wage comes up. 40 million people. He addresses this in an article saying, hey, what was Joe Biden going to do? What do you mean, what was Joe Biden going to do? Joe Biden is the president of the United States. The House of Representatives had just passed the $15 an hour minimum wage bill within the context of the stimulus. The parliamentarian ruled against it. Who gives a shit? The parliamentarian can be removed and pushed to the side. So the question becomes, are you going to be able to marshal the 51 votes in the Senate in order to get the $15 an hour minimum wage passed? This is something that would have affected 40 million people. This is not trivial. This is not you sitting there writing this article saying, oh, these progressives are formulaically hitting Joe Biden. That's not what this is. If you're asking whether it was important enough to hold up the COVID bill, well, it was important enough for Joe Manchin to hold it up, meaning denying the American workers $15 an hour after the President of the United States has said it, after the House of Representatives passed it. Joe Manchin had zero issue in saying, I'm not going to do this. Walks away. Hey, Joe Manchin, what about the kids? What about the people who are hungry? What about the people who need that check as soon as possible? Hey, it is more important to me to ensure that the American worker does not get $15 an hour, that they remain on starvation wages, as Joe Biden and many of the other people have called making less. And as somebody who lived with a mom who made less, it is a starvation wage. Everything that goes on is a disaster at that point. So if you're asking me whether it's wrong for us to hit him on that, no, it's not wrong for us to hit him on that. There are 40 million Americans that are going to make less than a starvation wage because Joe Biden didn't have it in him, in real terms, to go to the mat for that. If you have the House and a president and you're telling me the people who are pushing back, by the way, the people who would be holding up the bill, by the way, would be Joe Manchin. It wouldn't be the lefties. If the president is for it, if the House is for it, if the Senate is the holdup, then the issue is the Senate. The issue is not the House or the president. But that's assuming that the president is for it. And that's the catch. Joe Biden may get out here and say all sorts of stuff. But in real terms, the main thing that has got done is the $1.9 trillion stimulus plan. And I hate to tell you this, but Trump was pushing for a $1.8 trillion that Nancy Pelosi basically put the kibosh on. So in real terms, the catch becomes, what about the issue of voting rights? What about the issue of the $15 an hour minimum wage? What about the PRO Act? What about the drug laws? Something that he could do just from the presidential pulpit. What about getting rid of $50,000 of student debt again? Something he could do with the flick of a pen. And yes, trying to get rid of the filibuster. The president of the United States has all sorts of powers and authorities when you have 600,000 Americans drop dead. Period. If the president is going after Joe Manchin for not being willing to get $15 an hour, and Joe Manchin is going to have to stand in front of the American public and make the argument that the American worker is not worth $15 an hour, then Joe Biden should do that. There should be a political cost associated with Joe Manchin standing against the president. That's what a president does when a president really means what he does. And by the way, using America as his reason and rationale. Doing this for America! How dare you stand in the way? How dare you say the American worker is not worth $15 an hour? How dare you take food out of the mouths of mothers at those food banks? I, Joe Biden, was at those food banks. I talked to those moms. I talked to those kids. And you, Joe Manchin, you, Simona, are preventing those mothers, delaying those mothers from getting the food, the money that they need to get from point A to point D. That's what you guys are doing. And you felt it was so important that the American worker wasn't worth the starvation wage, a wage, by the way, that would be at $23 if it kept up with productivity. That you are so, why do you hate the American worker so? Yes, a president that means it, a president that has a sense of urgency about it, a president where he digs in them, says those things, goes after Manchin and these other guys for those things. You're not writing an article to lefties if the president of the United States really was representing this kind of FDR-ish presidency. Donald Trump drops the tax rate to what, like 21%. Biden says, I'm going to raise it to 29%. And people are like shocked. It was 35% prior. So basically, this FDR president is lowering the tax rate. And the wild part about that is not even just lowering the corporate tax rate. It's like an entire capitulation. If the president really indeed needed and wanted to get his job done, the bully pulpit would have been in full action. And with 600,000 Americans dead, I have a hard time believing that anybody would have been able to stand against them. But that's a different president. That's a president that looks and sounds more like Sanders. That's a president that still has the capability to think off the top of his head, to use rhythm, rhyme, to, come up with certain barbs that sting, that is willing and able to put the candidacy of various members that are standing against him up for grabs in favor of people who would push and support his agenda. That's called vision. That's called meaning it. That's called something digging in you. And it's not in him. Biden doesn't deserve a break. Biden and anybody else can say anything that they want. The catch becomes, what do you do? And the fact of the matter is, he had the opportunity to pass a $15 an hour minimum wage. He didn't do it. And even if you want to give him a pass on that, you still have these other issues associated with Biden that he could do while he's in office with a flick of a pen. The marijuana thing, something he said he was going to do that he still haven't done that he could have did on day one. The $50,000 of student debt, something that he could have did but he didn't do on day one. I suppose you're writing this because you know midterms are coming up and you want to be getting early on the Biden apology tour and trying to tell progressives, look, I know he didn't do any of the stuff that he said he was going to do, but this other guy's a monster, so you should still vote for him. It is appalling that you're so willing to settle for business as usual after 600,000 Americans have dropped dead, after all of these businesses went belly up, after all of these people were infected with the virus. Business as usual. One last point. Right now, there's an argument that is taking place that is astonishing in the framing of the argument, but I shouldn't be astonished at all because this is America and it's often organized around the top 1% in their interests and wants. So they are basically saying, hey, Joe Biden, the money that you gave to people from the standpoint of the stimulus and for the money over the course of the extra few months is preventing people from going back to work. Now think about what we're saying for the moment. People who initially were working at a starvation wage, a subsistence hand-to-mouth wage, got fired and got a break. And in some respects, sometimes they were even at one point, especially for the very lowest of earners, making a slight bit more than what they were making when they were working. The companies start to reopen and start to bring and open back jobs. And they are offering shitty wages to the various people, and the people who for once get a gasp of air, a space cushion, say, I don't want to take that job. I don't want to take that job at that wage. Now, the political class say, hey, we have a problem. The money that you're giving people are stopping them from working hand to mouth at a subsistence starvation wage. You did that, Joe Biden. That's your fault. You kept giving them money, and because of that, they aren't going back to their starvation jobs. Think about what we're saying for the moment. If a job can't pay a wage that a person can live off, that job shouldn't exist. Full stop. And I know there's some jobs that needs to be subsidized and everything else, fair enough. But we're talking about private companies, we're talking about businesses, and we're talking about these businesses that want their employees back. If you want your employees back, you need to pay them a wage that they can live off. Full stop. You don't have an employee shortage problem. You don't even have a problem with the money that was going to unemployment. What you have is a problem of businesses that have gotten so used to paying people shit and piss that now they want to go back to business as usual, and people, many, are saying no dice. If you're the Biden administration, you should not take any shit off of anybody arguing about this notion that these people need to get back to a starvation wage. And you giving ends that help cut poverty, cut depression, cut this notion of desperation because they didn't necessarily have the money. You need to focus on that, frame it in those terms, and go after them from the perspective of the workers that you are supposed to be representing in this presidency. Who do you represent? That's what this really boils down to. What is your framing of the world within the context of that representation? And if that is the American worker, if that is the America because we need to compete with China, whatever excuse you use, then you need to tighten up. Give Biden a break? No. It's the opposite of that. Biden shouldn't get a break at all. In fact, you should be in Biden's ass. And the idea that you're going to write an article like this is appalling. Utterly and entirely appalling. This was in March, but still, I would imagine he has the same idea because nothing has fundamentally changed. And this is, we're going at some point into midterms pretty soon, or at the very least, the campaigning for midterms. And the public is going to ask, what did Biden accomplish? Now, Biden got a 60% approval rating, but I suspect a lot of that has to do with the comparison to Trump and just being tired. Be like, whew, puff of smoke, we'll take it. But there's something to be said, however, when you've had this many people die, this many people sick, this many businesses go belly up, and your country is reshuffling on some level with the level of inflation and everything else, you are being presented with problems. Your initial response was that we're going to be a lefty presidency because we need to resolve this stuff. You need to show to the American public how you're going to get your agenda accomplished. The bipartisanship, for the sake of bipartisanship, is ridiculous. And if you end up in a situation where you negotiate yourself down and then every Republican still votes against it, that idiocy will be entirely on you. You can't blame Republicans for what is taking place in the Biden presidency. It is all on Joe Biden. We have chats. Let's see. There are no scraps in my scrapbook. David Dominici and the Flashy Brown. Long live and prosper, Jamarl. My first super chat to anyone. Oh, the Flashy Brown. Thank you. Thank you, Flashy Brown. All right. I'm going to end this here. I'm going to say like. I'm going to say share and subscribe. Thanks all.